Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
This morning, the Conservatives have outlined proposals for boosting UK trade after Brexit. The party, which intends to take Britain out of the EU's single market and customs union, says Brexit will allow Britain to seek bilateral trade deals with old friends and new allies across the world. The plan, which is being outlined today by Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson, would see the government establish a global network of 9 trade commissioners. While we don't yet know the regions where the commissioners will be based, the Foreign Secretary has previously talked of striking trade deals with the likes of the US, India and Australia. The 9 commissioners will be part of a new board of trade to help increase exports and attract foreign investment in the UK. But not everybody is on board, with the Liberal Democrats saying a UK board of trade, an institution that has its roots in the 17th century, is an outdated idea, probably written on parchment. Meanwhile, Labour says it's focused on maintaining tariff-free access to the EU's single market. Well, earlier today, the Foreign Secretary said he thought Brexit offered the UK a series of unique opportunities.
In the biggest popular mandate ever delivered in our history, the British people voted to leave the European Union. And we voted to take back control of our cash and our borders and, above all, of our law-making system. To put the British people back in the driving seat of their country, to give us the freedom once again to negotiate our own trade deals, to take back control of our economic destiny, and to build on the extraordinary traditions of this country as a global Britain, a trading nation that looks not just to our friends in Europe, but around the world.
Mark Harper is still with us, and of course Jonathan Bartley, co-leader of the Green Party, is also here. Post-Brexit, the Greens must want the UK to make the most of all the economic opportunities that are available. So I presume you agree with much of what Boris Johnson has said.
Well, the obvious way to make the most of those economic benefits is to stay in the single market. And that's the no-brainer. Why wouldn't you do that rather than having to pursue all these additional trade deals? But if we are going to go down that route, I think we've got to watch out for the very weak bargaining position that we're going to put ourselves in.
Why is it weak?
Well, we're seen with Theresa May going cap in hand to Donald Trump. We've seen in her rolling over on, even raising climate change with the president on the phone over withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. She seems to be unable to curry any favour with the president. We will be in a weak situation going to the president. What will that mean? Probably that Donald Trump will come to us and say, well, you can have a TTIP-style trade agreement, which will have a investor-state dispute settlement procedure, secret courts, which will open up our public services to potential competition from American corporations, will open up the spectre of privatisation of our health service and other public services. I mean, that is extremely, extremely worrying.
Yes, except, of course, it's not on the table, according to the government, in terms of opening up Britain's public services to
what is
American
on the table?
Well, let's ask Mark Harper. I mean, this idea of creating 9 new commissioner jobs and a board of trade, Mark Harper, I mean, it may prove to be, lovely in the future when Brexit is being negotiated, but it's nothing more than window dressing. It's not substantive policy, is it?
No, it's very important. The important thing about the rest of the world outside the European Union is it's where the world is actually growing fastest and where we need to take advantage of those trade opportunities. And why it's important actually comes back to the discussion we were just having. If you want to have good national security, strong defences, strong policing, you've got to have a strong economy to be able to pay for all of these things. And as we leave the European Union, which was voted for by the public very strongly last year, as the Foreign Secretary said, we need to make the most of both a good deal with the European Union, and those Brexit negotiations will start just 11 days after the election, which is why we need a strong government led by Theresa May to land that good deal. Yeah, but we also need to make the most of the opportunities that there are around the world.
Right, well, let's have a look at some of these opportunities, because Jonathan Bartley raises the issue of Theresa May being weak, in effect, in her dealings with Donald Trump, for example. So is Britain going to be open? Are the public services going to be for sale, if push comes to shove, to allow private sector, maybe rightly or wrongly, private sector involvement in public services here?
Well, 2 things. The Prime Minister was asked this question in the House of Commons at Prime Minister's Questions, and she made it very clear that our NHS isn't for sale. The second thing I would say is that she wasn't weak. I was listening to what Jonathan said. The Prime Minister had a phone call with President Trump last week. She made it very clear that she was very disappointed by his decision about the Paris Climate Change Accord. She made it very clear that that wasn't our policy, and she will do her best to try and persuade the Americans to come back to the table.
Right.
The difficulty,
well,
of course, is that
Bartley.
that was one of Donald Trump's campaign promises, which he was delivering. And the Prime Minister made it very clear that we didn't support it.
Right. I mean, she made it clear. What more could she do? It was a campaign promise. He is doing what politicians so often fail to do, which is keep their campaign promises.
First of all, we knew this was on the agenda long ago. When she went over to see Donald Trump and marched hand in hand with him, she should have been raising this and putting this right to the top. Secondly, to express a lot of disappointment about the biggest challenge that we face going forward for the next 10, 20, 30 years. You know, there will be no trade deals if we don't tackle climate change. I mean, it's frankly embarrassing to see her in those debates saying, yes, I expressed a little bit of disappointment. You know what, if I'd been on that phone, I can't say what I would have said because you can't broadcast it this time of day, but I would have been very, very firm, and I would have said, look, this is a line in the sand for us.
Right. I mean, Mark Harper, what about the tweets from Donald Trump to Sadiq Khan over the terrorist attack and how it's been dealt with subsequently? Will Theresa May, should she be on the phone to Donald Trump to tell him to keep out of Britain's affairs?
Well, look, a couple of things. I think, first of all, the Prime Minister's made it very clear that the government's been working very closely with the Mayor of London and the Metropolitan Police. The second thing is, frankly, I think the Prime Minister has more than enough to do keeping Britain safe, focusing on the important issues at hand and not getting involved in who said what about whom on Twitter.
Right.
I think she's got her priorities straight, which is focusing on keeping Britain safe and thinking about, if she's successful at being re-elected on Thursday, getting down to those Brexit negotiations to make a success of them, which is important for our national security.
Don't you think this is, frankly, a bigoted Islamophobic president who would single out Sadiq Khan but not go for Andy Burnham in Manchester?
Well, Jonathan, I don't think, if we're going to be able to influence the American government, which is what we want to do, we want to make sure that we continue our strong relationship in NATO and we persuade them to do the right thing, I don't think throwing insults about is actually very productive. The most sensible,
hang on, Jonathan.
The most sensible thing is for the Prime Minister to have a constructive conversation, make it very clear that she didn't agree with his decision on the Paris Climate Change Accords.
All right,
but continue having that dialogue to try and persuade the American government to come back to the table and do the right thing on climate change. That's much more likely to be successful.
Mark Harper, let's move on to one of the other countries in the world that you perhaps would want to do a trade deal with after Brexit, particularly India. But there is a potential problem there as well, because the Indians have made it very clear that they would like more visas for Indian workers as part of a trade deal, for example. And we know that your Theresa May is committed, if the Tories win the election, to reducing net migration to tens of thousands. And the Australians have said the same too. So how are you going to manage that?
Well, the first thing is visas are always a part of a conversation with trade deals, but we already have a large number of Indian students, for example, coming to Britain. Well, we can have that discussion. The other thing worth remembering, Joe, is our net migration target is a net migration target. India is a very large market. I would expect if we were to conclude trade negotiations, you might well see Indians coming to Britain, but you would also see big economic opportunities for British companies working in India and opportunities for British business people actually to go and work in India, and in their businesses. So it seems to me you have these negotiations. You'll talk about trade opportunities. You'll talk about migration. You'll talk about our fabulous offer for our excellent university sector, which is second to none in the world, which the government's always been very supportive of. And it seems to me that's a very strong offer globally.
Right. Mark Harper's talking about compromise in negotiations, and there will have to be compromise in any negotiation that you have. The Green Party manifesto says we will be actively campaigning to safeguard jobs, uphold basic rights and put environmental protection at the heart of any future trade deals. It's a rather protectionist approach, isn't it? I mean, is it going to be practical when trade deals do involve compromise, as I say?
OK, I will come to that. Compromise is important, but this kind of compromise that we're showing, you know, I think that, just going back to that point...
Well, answer the question about the Green Party manifesto.
I will come to that in just one second.
We've talked about Sadiq Khan.
Yeah, I think that, frankly, until Donald Trump apologises to Sadiq Khan, he should not be allowed a state visit here. The compromises that this government are making over, for example, Saudi Arabia, exporting arms to Saudi Arabia, a huge export market. 2/3 of our arms sales go to the Middle East. Is this the kind of trade that we're wanting in the future? Is this the kind of leadership that we're going to show the world? That's not the kind of compromise that we should be making. Yes, there should be compromises made, but not that kind of compromise.
Are you comfortable, Mark Harper, with continuing trade relations with Saudi Arabia?
Yes, I am. Saudi Arabia is a partner in actually trying to combat some of this extremism. My understanding is that our intelligence services receive valuable information from the Saudis, which enables us to take steps to help keep Britain safe, which I think is very important.
So why has this report, why has a report into funding streams that was commissioned by David Cameron as part of an agreement, I understand, with the Liberal Democrats during the coalition government, why has it not been published yet?
Well, the honest answer, Joe, is I don't know. As you know, I'm a backbench member of Parliament. I haven't seen the report.
Do you think it's been suppressed?
Published. No, I don't think so. I genuinely don't know, and I don't know what's in the report, and I haven't seen it.
All right, Mark Harper, hang on.
Do you think it should be published?
Hang on, Mark Harper, I'm going to say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you very much.
It's the end of the discussion.